But because he was so violent and very, very controlling, I kept thinking things would get better.
Hello and welcome to number one channel. My name is David Chams. Today I'm lucky again to be joined by this powerful and amazing lady here. And due to demand, because guys, most of you have been pressing me to bring her on board again, at least you get to know more. So today we are back with a lot in store. So stay tuned, do not touch the dial. So I'll first give her a chance to introduce herself. Hi.
Hi, David. Thanks for
Welcome.
having me. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you for
Welcome
having me
once more.
again.
Exactly. I'm so happy again. I'm so happy to have you again. The first interview, of course, we did it in it was a kind of impromptu, very, very impromptu. So welcome back.
Asante sana.
Yeah. Just introduce yourself.
So I'm Susan Knapp, and I am the CEO and founder of an organization called I Iearnt Africa, amongst many other things that I do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow. I don't know where to start, but it's time for So, guys, today we shall be handling two topics, and number one is how to build a life after you've been knocked down to nothing, and then the second one will be domestic violence and how to heal from abuse. So, those are the two topics we shall be handling today. So, okay, let me say I'm just one of the luckiest guys to hosting this amazing and powerful lady, actually a CEO, international educator, speaker, author, with 25 experience, with 25 years in teaching and also in
Educational leadership.
education leadership.
Yeah.
In Kenya, Rwanda, Malaysia, Qatar, and Australia. So, first of all, let's just you just give us your brief history, because many people, wanted mostly to know, actually, to hear more from you.
Who is this lady?
Yes, who is
Who
this
is
lady?
this lady?
Exactly.
Okay, so who is this lady? That's actually quite a tough question. Yeah. So as we know, I've spent many years in Kenya, but I've also lived all around the world. And I think we mentioned in our last episode that my heart lives in Kenya. So recently I've come back to Kenya potentially for 12 months, maybe longer. And I am the mother of four amazing children who all have Kenyan heritage, and who are my teachers, who came into this world as my teachers. So I'm very, very proud to be their mother and to have them as my teachers. On top of that, I recently launched my first book. That was last November in Australia, which was a huge leap of faith. I'm setting myself as a thought leader because I like to disrupt systems that don't necessarily serve us. And I guess one of the ways that I do that is through what we build here in Kenya, but also raising my own children as entrepreneurs and raising children to understand that we're here to contribute to society.
Okay. Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. Now, there is okay. I've personally tried. I've tried to learn about you, okay. Let me say I was the first beneficiary of your story, like from scratch. I would like just to know, and also my audience would like to know, how did you start, like, to reach where you've reached? You're running so many, organizations around the globe. Let me say so, because being in Kenya and also multitasking to Australia. So how did the journey start?
Well, and prior to that, I was doing it the other way around. I was actually multitasking from Australia to Kenya, pretty much single-handedly, from my laptop or from my phone, and that's how we built the schools here, even without me being here. But how I started was I actually first came to Kenya a long time ago, about 25 years ago, as a supervisor on a teenage exchange program. And we came with 20 students from Australia, and they were living with families in Nairobi and Mombasa for 2 months. So when I came, I absolutely fell in love with Kenya and knew that I would never leave. So that's how I started, long time ago.
Wow. Well, so and then how was like the journey in between, like in every aspect of life, especially in entrepreneurship journey, there is that a challenge that people go through. What was it like?
Well, actually, I mean, I wasn't an entrepreneur. My whole life I've been an educator. So I've been a wage earner. I've worked in schools as teacher or in leadership positions. And I really stepped into entrepreneurship quite recently. And I've always done businesses as my side hustle, but actually doing it full time was something that came about as a result of losing everything in my life. Everything that I'd built, I lost it all. And then I decided that I needed to reinvent who I was and actually rewrite the narrative of who I was and step away from the default of who society thought I should be and step into writing my own narrative of who I am.
Wow. Now, back to our topics. Let's start with how to build a life after you've lost everything to nothing. Of course, this one cuts across because many people go through this across the world, and especially in our country where the economy is just in another, So, with this, there's so many people go through in life. People lose business, people lose jobs, lose hope, and at some point, some end up even committing suicide. What much contribute to this, or what could be the what is this mechanism that can be applied to avoid all this?
Well, I mean, it's a complex question, and I think both of the questions that we're exploring today are probably interrelated. So perhaps before I answer the question, I give you a little bit of information about what you would read on the blurb of my book. So on the back of my book, the title of my book is "Nothing is Too Big," and what you would read in the blurb on the back of the book is how I was held hostage in Barclays Moy Avenue in the 90s, and we were tear gassed out of the building. How I survived a train overturning in the jungles of Thailand. How I lost custody of my children for 3 years. And many other things. And many other things, including being with a husband who was very violent and abusive, and then becoming financially, emotionally, spiritually, and physically bankrupt.
Wow.
You always say, wow.
Amazing. Your stories are amazing. Okay, this all in your book.
Yes.
So can we just talk about this, discuss this and this topic, or discuss this topic basing on this life experience of yours? I don't know where we start because you've mentioned a number of things that you've gone through: losing your children, accident in a train, being held hostage at Moy Avenue in Nairobi, and many more. So, just can we just talk about this to inspire someone basing on this topic?
I think in order to actually sum up that, which connects into your question of how do we heal, life, I really learned along this journey of life, which has been a very rich and exciting journey for me, despite all of these hardships. It's a continuum. And I believe that our purpose in life is to find inner peace. And so I learned as part of my healing that the universe, throughout our life, the universe will throw challenges at us. But the universe will only throw a challenge that it knows, we know how to handle. And the purpose of those challenges are for us to grow, for us to learn, for us to transform, and for us to write our own narratives. But I think as humans, what we quite often do is we fall into the societal trap of being a victim of circumstance. And one of the things that I learnt again on my journey of healing was being a victim can actually be a commodity for the system. And if we, as we go through this journey towards peace and through that channel of healing, we can choose. I'm either going to be a victim of this, or I'm going to step into my authentic self, which is to be a creator. And very many people don't understand that. And society doesn't want us to do that. Society, it's easier for society if we're a victim than if we pull ourselves up and wake up and become the creatives that we're meant to be.
Wow.
I love the way you always say wow, David. It's always wow.
I'm always overwhelmed. Okay.
Wow.
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 It's a good one. Yes. Now, in every aspect of life, like we whenever we fall,
Mhm.
no one is always ready to accept.
Mhm.
No one is ready to move on.
Mhm.
Very few move on.
Mhm.
And majority will say, God hates me or something. They're giving up in life.
Yes.
Is it the right thing? Like, giving up in life, saying this is over, me, and I've lost my job, I've lost my business, I've lost my family. This is over. What is your take on that?
So my book has many interesting chapters, and another chapter is the chapter title is A PhD in Being Fired. So I actually have a PhD literally in being fired. I'm an expert at being fired.
Being fired.
Being fired from my job, right?
You're an expert.
So, an expert. So on top of all of those other things that I mentioned to you, I've also been fired from nearly every job I've held. And I don't just get fired like pack your bags and go. I was working in a school in Qatar and I got fired, and for various reasons I ended up getting held under country arrest in Qatar for 1 year. And that was what was a contributing factor towards losing my children. I then moved to Rwanda and we had a similar thing. So, losing your job, I'm also quite an expert at something like that. But there's a very amazing lady whose name is Brené Brown, and she wrote a book called Rising Strong. And it teaches us that life is not about how many times we fall. Life is about the strength and grace and self-respect and the journey of rising that will make us stronger. So when you talk about people losing hope or becoming a victim, that's easy. That's easy. Yes, because something might happen to you and you decide, okay, well, I'm going to crawl up in a fetal position and I'm going to lie on my bed and someone will bring me food and someone will do this. And that's where you are. That's easy. Yeah. The hard part is actually saying to a world that has tried to beat you down, you're not going to win. I'm going to get up and I'm going to keep going and I'm going to show you that I can conquer this. That's the hard part.
That's the hard part.
That's the hard part. Yeah, and it's really, really hard. And
Yeah.
when I teach people, I tell them, this is very painful. I will not lie to you. It's very painful. Dusting yourself off and picking yourself up is very painful. And sometimes people only get it in one domain, like perhaps you've lost your job, or they don't usually get the whole combination that I've had. I've just had so many, and I've had to keep picking myself up and dusting myself off.
Okay, having said you lost your job, and there's a word you're using, expert in firing, like your PhD in firing. How did you manage to cope? How did you manage? You're a human being like any other. How did you manage to, go through this?
Well, you don't have a choice at the time, do you? I mean, if someone is going to fire you, there's very little you can do. And I've also had lots of experiences where, you try to tap into your logical, rational brain for an answer, and it's very rarely there. So with something like being fired, what I learned as I went on my journey of healing, what I learned is that every single time I was fired, it was the universe telling me my light was shining in the wrong direction. So it was actually the universe guiding me to where I was meant to be, because I wouldn't have done that alone. I would have stayed in the 9 to 5 and stayed with the paycheck and stayed in that comfort. And so once I understood that, and again, that's a real teachable moment, because quite often we will fall into that victim when we've lost our job and we'll think that the world is over. But when you understand, actually, this is like a tap on the shoulder from God or the universe telling you need to realign. And I'm a very slow learner. I've had lots of realigning.
You need to wake up.
You need to wake up.
Dust yourself.
Absolutely. And many people, if they can wake up and dust themselves, quite often you'll find that people who are in some form of employment actually hate it. They hate it. Yeah. They don't want to do it. They're doing it because they've got stuck on this hamster wheel and they don't know how to get off. And so I now believe that the universe will give you those wake-up calls and will say, I'm helping you here to actually activate what you really love to do. Yeah.
Okay. So in case you are fired or something happened like at your job, maybe losing it, you don't have to go hanging yourself.
No. You have to sit with yourself and say, what is it about me that I need to learn here?
Because you see, here in Kenya, when someone getting a job is not something easy once you lose, because you'll have to stay for a number of days, months, or maybe years before you get another job. So maybe someone has worked somewhere for so many years and they feel like, okay, I've lost it. Where do I start? So they end up like, some even go back to, rural home. Some remain Nairobi, but, giving up, living a miserable life, and brings all along with depression. So
I think it's such a subjective term, because again, in Nairobi, we sort of believe that if you go back to your rural home, there's some shame or some stigma. Maybe it's better. Because there you can live a peaceful life, you can live a grounded life, you're surrounded by community, you're not in the rat race. It all depends on what we've been taught to believe and whether we have consciously activated our thinking around those beliefs, which quite often we don't. So in my case, every time I got fired, it was really devastating, but every time it led me to where I was supposed to be and what I was supposed to do. So then it's about how you use your mind to process those things.
Okay. Apparently, you've been fired a number of times.
A lot.
With your experience. So it reached a point where you saw like this normal, right? You're being fired and move on.
Yeah, probably not normal because I was raised to believe in that whole ideology of employment and earning a salary. But it got to the point where, you know, for various reasons, I just decided I will never put myself into a position where someone has that power over me and over the governance of my life. And that's where I stepped into entrepreneurship. Yeah.
Well, back to entrepreneurship, you've just mentioned. People in business, most of them, once they're fired, they decide no, or even leave alone being fired. Some decide, I don't want to be employed. I just want to do my business. And actually, some excel, some don't. What's your take on that? Like somebody, even some decide, okay, for example, I open a shop. Maybe I'm working, for example, I open my business and start like doing well. I decide to, this job will not help me a lot. My business is doing well after all. So what am I doing with this job? Let me quit. So do you advise between the employment and business? Do you advise people to go entrepreneur way or go employment way?
No, I think I wouldn't be an expert on giving that advice, but I think, again, it comes back to really looking within yourself and having those deep conversations with yourself to know what it is that sparks joy within you, what it is that activates your soul. And I think we also need to be mindful of how we quantify success, because we've tended to, in Nairobi and in our sort of Western ideologies, we've been brainwashed into believing that success is how much money you have in your bank account. So if we actually transfer our definition of success, for me, that's not what defines success. Success is the impact I can make into the life of another person. Another wow.
Healing.
Mm-hmm.
There is something you mentioned about your family. Like there was a time, there's a scenario that happened of accident, and there's another one that happened losing a child and all that, your children and all that. All these things happening. How did you manage to say, okay, this is it? How did you handle them? For you, healing process actually apparently was long, right?
Yeah, it was very long.
Yeah.
Yeah, because like I said, I'm a very slow learner. Yeah.
How did you manage all these?
I don't know whether I did manage it. I think the people who were around me at the time that I was going through some of these incidences, they would probably say I didn't manage it. You can't. You just go into autopilot and you're literally putting one foot in front of the other, and then your life becomes a train wreck. And so I guess that's where, it was around that time that the domestic violence really, really activated. It was across countries and at varying degrees of.
Yeah, in Kenya or Australia?
So my husband was Kenyan, and yeah, but we moved around quite a lot. So I think what actually became so if you look at my life and what I've written through the book, it really was a bit of a train wreck itself. There was just constant drama and constant things going wrong, despite the perception of it being an amazing life. And I was traveling, I had money in the bank, all of these sorts of things. But then the universe decided, we need to draw this person into your life really for you to wake up, and reassess. So the second part of the book is about me rewriting the narrative of my life. And the catalyst for that came to being where, a lot of intercultural marriages between Kenyans and Westerners are such that they're formed on the fact that the Kenyan wants to leave Kenya. Yeah, so they're not. they're not formed. I mean, I'm talking generally, but it's not like if you create a relationship with somebody from your own culture, there is generally that different value chain of each person going into the relationship.
Yes.
So for my second husband, that was his intention, only that. And without achieving that, he hadn't achieved his purpose of getting into a relationship with me. But because he was so violent and very, very controlling, I kept thinking things would get better. You know, he'll change. He will love me more. He will think things are okay. And but the icing on the cake was when I finally took him to Australia, and he went to Australia on a visit visa, and he decided that he could fast track his residency visa by claiming that he was the victim of domestic violence.
Wow. Well, Australia.
This is a big wow. This is a huge wow.
It's a huge wow.
This
Exactly.
is a huge wow.
Exactly.
And it's also, as I researched this later, it's also a very, very common tactic of perpetrators of violence when they feel like they're losing control. They will then flip the system so that the victim is then prosecuted. The victim. So I'd now been living with this person in various countries around the world, finally succumbed and took him to Australia, my country, and he succeeded in manipulating the system and having me convicted of violence towards him.
That was your husband?
Yes.
So you got convicted?
I did. So as a result of, he walked into a police station and filed these charges against me. And actually nobody within the system actually believed him. But because of the channel that he had taken in terms of going into the police station and filing, they had to follow through. So it went to court, and he stood next to me in court, and I was obviously very, very broken at this time, and I was put on a 5-year good behaviour bond as the perpetrator of violence towards him. And it was insane, because it's very different as an expatriate when you live in other countries. You go by their rules. But now I was back in my own, and this person had succeeded in manipulating my system against me for his own gain.
Wow. So he managed to get you convicted. How? Okay. Were you like thrown behind bars, or as you're saying, you are given the bond?
Yeah. So what happens in the system, because domestic violence is such a common thing nowadays, there's many, many people that go to court. They can't put everybody in jail. So what happens in the system of where I was living was I got put on a good behaviour bond, and it's basically 2 strikes and you're out. So I was issued with a whole list of things that I was not allowed to do to him, like shouting or calling or all of these things, or they would be considered a breach of this thing that I had. But what it actually did is it gave him so much more power to abuse me.
Wow. Now in this, because he rushed to police station and also report all the abuse and all was it malicious, or is it true there was abuse, or
from my side or
from your side? From your side.
From my side. So what actually happened that led up to that was he would get me very, very upset and then video me and then send those videos to all of his friends and family. And so that's what he was doing on this particular day. And I took his phone and threw it on the ground and broke it. only to learn that in Australia that's considered domestic violence. So breaking someone's phone quantifies domestic violence. And so and I actually pled guilty because I had done that. But what it did is the whole system actually gave him so much more power, because what he did straight after we left court was move back into my house.
He moved back to your house.
He moved back into my house because now he's got the full power and control over me. Because if he's now the victim and I'm the perpetrator by law and on paper, and so if I commit a second offence towards him, I then go to jail.
Now, was this the first husband or the second one?
This was the second one.
The second one.
Yeah, this was the second one. So we were together for about 6 years, and it was 6 years of absolute insanity.
So he could be physical, violent or something?
He was violent on every level. He was emotionally violent. He was physically violent. As a result of being in a relationship with him, that's why I lost my children. It's also why I became financially bankrupt.
Because of him?
Not purely because of him, but he was a contributor.
A main one.
Yeah, he was a main contributor. But however, okay, so I'm going to flip this around, because if I go back to what I said at the beginning about the universe will give you these challenges.
Yes, exactly.
And so connecting into your other question, David, about how we heal, what I had to do in order to heal, and I'd literally been lying in this energetic fetal position for a very long time. And what I had to do was accept responsibility, which is a very difficult thing to do. So I had to accept responsibility for the fact that I drew this person into my life, and I drew these experiences into my life. And when you can do that, so I learned through this process that when you can do that, you then have the capacity to forgive the unforgivable. Because when we learn how to forgive the unforgivable, we set ourselves free.
True.
And then we have gratitude.
Wow. Now
Another wow.
Another wow.
We should call this episode Wow.
Yeah, exactly.
Just wow.
Now, okay. It actually, you've been through a lot. So you accepted to move on, like the way you're saying, like, healing process, that it was part of healing process, and you accepted to move on. Now my question comes in, the children you're saying you lost through this man, was it like the ones that you're having currently, or?
So, it's a very complex story. But when I lost my job in Qatar, I had a bank loan, and so their labour law wouldn't let me leave the country because I didn't have the money to complete the loan. So my 3 oldest children, who are the children of my first husband, they needed to leave Qatar. So they left and went to their dad, who is Kenyan and who was living in Australia. And then when he found out about the violence and abuse that was occurring from the second husband, he decided he wouldn't let the children come back into that, which was a wise thing for him to do as a father. Yeah.
Because as a father, you must give a wise advice to the children.
Yes.
So from there, you must have been gone through that. Let me not use the word depression, but a hard life, in a way that healing was not something that walk in the park by then for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think the whole story is actually quite insane. I think everybody goes through a hard life.
Exactly.
This one was like completely crazy. And so I got to the point where it was literally, am I going to live or am I going to die? And I was either going to die, the probability was that I was going to die at the hands of this man. However, at that time, I still had two very small children.
Very small children.
Very small children. And so, you read it in books that you sort of have this epiphany and you realize that you owe your children a healed parent. Like, I actually really decided I owed my children the right to a healed parent. And, if I was going to be blaming the father or condemning him, who was that going to help? It wasn't going to help anybody. So I made this very conscious decision that I was going to do whatever it took to get myself to a place of inner peace, and that my mind would be restored to have peace of mind. And what happened was, when I'd returned back to Australia, the domestic violence, I'd gone through court for this insane domestic violence scenario. And then my dad died.
Oh, Pole. Sorry. Yeah.
And he died very suddenly. And as I was, it was just like everything on top of each other. But I truly believe that he saved my life. And he saved the life of my children, because when he died, it opened a safe haven for my kids and I to leave this man and go and live with my mum.
Okay. Wow. Now.
Another wow.
Yes.
Another wow.
Yes. Now, there's some lessons. In every aspect of life, we must learn lessons.
Yes.
Here in Kenya, let's now talk about this. In Kenya, people go through a lot, especially ladies or women, when it comes to domestic violence. Many of them are always abused. Some walk away, something like that. What lessons did you learn from these, all these scenarios?
So the lesson that I learned was a very, very deep one. And it's also a very confronting one for people who want to stay in that victim modality. So my deepest lesson was that I am 100% responsible for every person, every event, and every situation that is in my life. So for me, I accepted responsibility for the fact that I met this person, the fact that I drew this person into my life. And as we said last time, David, I'm actually now really grateful.
Yeah, because
I'm really, really grateful. I'm grateful that he's gone. I'm grateful that someone else has the responsibility of him. And I'm grateful that I have this amazing child. So I learned that, again, it was this universal lesson that I drew in for the purpose of my healing. So if we stick in a mindset of blame, we will never heal. We'll never heal. So, I could be on your show telling you how awful he is and telling you all of these things. But the greatest tool is to understand that energetically, like the way we met in a car park, it was meant to be.
Exactly.
It was meant to be. So energetically, we draw in everybody that we need for this journey of life. And some of those experiences will be positive, some of them not so positive, but all of them are what is required for us to get to that point of peace.
Absolutely. The reason why I'm asking about the lessons actually is, as most ladies, or let me say, ladies who are married or women who are married, some are abused, but they don't want to leave. They want to stick there with the back in mind that one day this man will change.
He won't.
What is your take on this?
So no, as an educator, One of the things that you first learn when you're learning behavior management is you can never force a child to behave the way you want. You can never force them to. What we have to do is we have to look at our own biases and perceptions and get the child to rise up. And it's just human behavior. So what I learned is I will never be able to change this man. And I tried for 6 years. I tried everything. I will never be able to change him. All I can do is work on myself. So I had to go deep inside myself and look at these wounds of abuse, betrayal, rejection, shame, fear. I had to actually go very deep inside myself and identify all of those things and then work on healing them. So he's never changed. He's still exactly the same person who he was when we were together. But I am a completely different person because I did that. So he gifted me that process.
Wow.
I love your house. I love your house.
Wow. Now, actually, it's sad. It's sad with the in this 21st century. Someone, women are still being abused around. Some even end up, in deaths, or maybe found dead in the houses. It has happened in Kenya here, and in many cases, even in the world, across the world, because you found somebody, somebody killed the spouse, somebody killed the wife. What you as educator, or maybe with your experience, what mostly contribute or to all this? Because I can't just wake up then start beating you from nowhere.
I think that we've really lost or perhaps we never had, an understanding of what unconditional love is. And there's a spiritual teacher called Eckhart Tolle, and he equates our version of love to power and control. And I think that we superficially get into these situations claiming that it's love, but actually it's a match of our egos to see who's going to conquer. And so then there's a clash. And I think that this is something that, again, I really believe that it's an evolutionary process, because if we have the tools, we can really learn a lot from them. And we then learn that essence of unconditional love. You see, love nowadays within a relationship has a lot of terms and conditions, yeah? And we don't know what they are until we're so deep inside this relationship. And then we're like, now what do I do? Yeah, there's no rules.
Yeah.
And you look at things that are happening within relationships, and it is quite insane. But then if we actually take a different view of that relationship and say, this relationship is where we're put together in this union to activate the best version of ourselves, not the worst, then we take a much more conscious approach to what's going on. But it's very hard. It's very hard. And these are also quite deep concepts. Yeah.
Okay. It seems we are much blaming on, a man's side, like being,
It takes two.
being, at the cause of all this in these marriages and all that. Do you think ladies are also, contributing to this abusive marriage life? Because we can't be blaming only men who do.
No, we can't.
Yeah, because this thing, we are two in this, all of us.
Yeah.
And in case of anything, like your case you're saying back in Australia, it's a man who, accused you having abused or used, gone against the law. So is it also, does it also mean ladies are contribute much, or do we blame also men, or ladies, or?
No, I think it can be both sides. I think something else that I've learned as I've gone through this process, though, and something that I've been exploring is how society creates these social ails into a commodity. There's actually a lot of money to be made through domestic violence, isn't there?
It is.
So in my situation, the people who there was a massive system, and I was very new back in Australia when this happened. I'd only been back for 6 months, having been away for 20 years.
20 years.
I'd been away for 20 years, 6 months back, and this is what I was living.
Oh.
So you learn there's social workers and counselors and psychologists and the police and the judiciary. All of these things are making money from my situation. And so so I became a commodity.
Okay.
Yeah, the problems that I was going through, no one's going to provide me with a service that doesn't cost money.
Yeah, because they're seeing you like now a liability.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Or maybe an asset. Maybe I'm an asset to generating profit. So again, this is quite not a lot of people look at it this way. And so I was very fortunate to, as I went through the system, also to know what I knew from having lived out of Australia for such a long time, that I took on the role of a bit of an observer. And so I think, if we're bringing it back to Kenya and we're looking at relationships, here there's such high expectations of people when they get into a relationship. Women, I think nowadays, have exceptionally high expectations of men.
Absolutely.
And there are, from my experience, there's a very small resource of men who can meet the enormity of those expectations. So, so automatically there's going to be frustration, there's going to be ego, there's going to be these power battles. And it's about, am I going to love you for you? Whether you are broke or not, whether you have a car, whether you have a house, whether you have any money in your wallet, am I going to love you? Because that's unconditional love. If I can love you when you're poor, I really love you.
When you're rich, of course.
Yeah. And Nairobi in particular has really shifted that. And it leads to conflict. And it leads to frustration.
Exactly. Actually, I support your point. Of course, especially here in Kenya, ladies go in those marriages with high expectations. With all my materialized mind. Like today, I'm marrying you because you have this and you have this. So probably if you reach a point where now you lost it, that's the end.
Well,
so what?
And that automatically tells you, if a lady is marrying you because you have this and this and this, it automatically tells you that she's quite shallow. Doesn't it? I mean, without even being disrespectful.
Yeah.
It automatically tells you,
Yes.
And if we look back to how, even nowadays, how weddings are, weddings are these very, very big, expensive occasions. And traditionally, that's not what a wedding was.
Yeah. Okay. Of course, like you're saying, the weddings are, big weddings, and after a while you found them. So what can we do? Like, with your local system of marriage, like in Kenya, we have that culture set up. Believe I'm going to marry him. I love him. He's going to be my husband. is going to my wife. We sign certificate, but later on, after 1 or 2, 3 years, you hear, oh, so and so separated. So what contributes all this?
It's actually about having conversations. And it's actually asking people really tough questions. Like, remember when we met and
Yes.
I asked you, do you send your kids to school?
True.
And I said, why? So, but those conversations, if they're done without attacking, they're actually points of growth. So, for example, if a couple came to me and said, we're getting married, I'd say, why? And they'll say, because we love each other. And what does that look like? Nobody can answer.
Prove.
Nobody can answer.
Yeah.
It looks like I will live in a mabati room with this man on a single bed, and we will still be okay.
The expectation, how do you prove this? Like we met, we started, maybe a lady and a man have met. They start the affairs. Reach a point, we have courtship, all that, wedding, from nowhere, in the house, domestic violence and all that. Parents intervention, both sides, relatives coming and sitting down, talking to these people. It happens here in Kenya in most cases. So, okay, do we have to apply dialogue, or what do we do? Even sometimes dialogue doesn't work nowadays.
Well, again, if you go back to traditionally, and let me connect that to my own story. So traditionally, the families of the male and the female would have been responsible for the negotiations around this union. And if I look at my own life circumstance, my parents would have never have chosen this person. They never would have, because we were not culturally compatible. We were not economically compatible. We were not religiously compatible. We had no compatibility. But I say, I love this person and I want to be with this person, and he says the same thing. But again, going back to culturally, our parents actually want what's best for us. On both sides.
Precisely.
Her parents want what is best for her. And so they have that checklist. The checklist that we say we don't have,
Yes.
they have it.
Exactly.
They know you better than anybody else. They know all of these things about you, and they are actually the best judges to put somebody who's compatible with you. But we've evolved out of that. And if we go back to healing, part of the reason why we've evolved out of it is because all of these situations are for the purpose of our healing. Yeah. Good, bad, yes, ugly, beautiful. Exactly. They are all designed for us to look within ourselves and then have these sorts of conversations that bring some very simple truths. Because what I'm saying is not revolutionary. No. We've just forgotten.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, the thing is, ladies outside there are watching us, watching what we're discussing about. And somebody would want to, somebody seated somewhere, what do I do? Where do I learn this? I'm in this, domestic, violent marriage. I'm always, abused. So what do you tell such ladies outside there who are, in such marriages?
It's such a complex question to answer because, again, people used to always say to me, like, people would perceive me as intelligent and worldly and self-sufficient. And people would always say, why don't you leave? And it's much, much deeper than that. And it is connected into those wounds because, and what I learned as I started healing was that I actually had an addiction to suffering, and he fed that. So the cycle of abuse is a very, very addictive cycle because it has some amazing highs and then some devastating lows. And that's like if you're using a drug. If you're using cocaine, you will have a high and then you will come down to a low. And so then you'll need more of that substance to go high again.
Exactly.
So, and that's actually a pattern of domestic violence. It's like a drug because of the adrenaline that it pumps through your body.
Yeah.
So the first thing that I would say to somebody who's perhaps in that situation is I would give them this example and ask them to go and observe their own life. Because you can actually feel the enormous high of being with this person. And then when you're conscious of it, you feel the low. You know, he disappears for 3 days, he turns his phone off, all of these sorts of scenarios. It's all textbook. So then that low plummets you down, and then all of a sudden he'll come back and you go high again. And so it's then working out, is that how you want to be for your whole life?
Let's look at this scenario. She's there, having 5 children, grown up, some are in high school. If she look behind, time is gone. She has no place to go. The only option is to stay. So, such kind of person, what is this? Maybe a solution or maybe advice that they may need to, be told to move on, or to just feel like now this is the only way I can do to avoid this.
So what happens is, the first point, it doesn't matter whether you're still in the house with this person or whether you have all of those children. The most important thing is that conversation that you're having with yourself as to why you're perceiving this situation this way. And if you start doing that inner work, you will actually get to a point where you no longer care whether he comes home or not. It's a blessing. It's actually, if he's going to, maybe in the beginning of the relationship, if he disappears, you're feeling hurt and you're calling 50 times and he's turned his phone off and you're crying and all of that. But as you then work on your own self-worth, your own loving of yourself, understanding of yourself, acceptance of yourself, then you actually get to a point where if he disappears for a month, it's beautiful.
The better.
The better.
Yes.
Because you've created this relationship with yourself and you're not relying on an external to fill you up. But it's very hard. I mean, we can't claim that this is easy. It's very, very difficult.
Yeah, of course it's very hard. It's very hard, especially if you have loved someone for 20, 30 years or 10 or something. It will be hard for many people.
I think the reason why it's so important to do it is so that we stop the cycle for our own children. So one of the things that I learned when my children were watching me be violated was children are energetically handcuffed through this situation. Like, they know what's going on. They're seeing it, they're hearing it, they're feeling it. They know what's going on, and they don't have a voice or the words to advocate or to say anything. So what I learned is actually the children are the ultimate victim here. And as a mother, we owe it to them to go through this personal pain so that they don't have to.
Another point is, you've just mentioned and reminded me, children especially, they always say a child has to win. And in most cases in Kenya, children okay, let me say in the world, children are the one who suffer most when it comes to violence. Because you start fighting the house, children are seated there watching over this, and later on some get affected even education wise. They never concentrate in school. They keep remembering that, and then for example, girls, they live hating their father. So, what's your take on this? Surely, it's something. It's painful. Yeah.
I mean, and it's a whole topic on its own, isn't it? But I think that another thing that we've forgotten as adults is quite often we behave like children. We behave like children more than the children.
What do you mean?
So if I'm actually in a relationship and I'm shouting at him or throwing things at him or vice versa, that's what children do. That's what we think children do. But we now have an epidemic of adults doing that. Children don't even do that anymore. The children are more mature than us. So again, it comes down to a lot of power and control, a lot of ego. But how can I claim to be an adult if I'm behaving like that in front of a child? I can't. I mean, I'm not going to swear, but I would, because it's about adults going, we are the ones who are misbehaving here. We are the ones.
Not children.
Not children. So if we're in a situation of domestic violence, and especially here in Kenya where our ideology around raising children is still not as open or free in the West, like for us, my kids could tell their father to stop.
Okay.
Or if it's an adult child, quite often we hear cases of a son actually growing to a point where he'll punch the father. But that's somebody who's been pushed.
And also, on the same case, the son will later on apply the same in the marriage.
Absolutely, absolutely. So it takes the bigger person to actually say, this will stop now.
Okay.
It really does. And it takes the bigger person, and it's, again, everything that we're talking about, David, is a process, and it involves a lot of pain, a lot of self-reflection. But the bigger person is the one who's going to say, I would rather parent these children alone than parent them like this.
Exactly. Enough. We say enough is enough.
Yeah, absolutely. And I owe it to my children to present the best version of myself, because that will then empower them to do the same.
Okay. Wow. Now, so maybe as we wind up, ladies are watching this thing, and someone is being empowered. Let me use the word empowered, because there is that depression, that people going through depression because of that. Yeah, the domestic violence. There are people outside there as we speak. They are separated, don't know where to go, and also where to start. Last words that you can, as a lady to these beautiful ladies outside there who are going through the same, because with your enough experience and you've gone through it, it's not easy. Healing is not easy. It's a process and it's a journey. So what do you tell them?
I think the first thing is to understand that the shame that you feel, when you share that, it activates the healing. So we always feel a lot of shame that somebody is doing this to us. So the first thing is to actually tell somebody, because that then starts a collective story. But then you want to tell somebody who's not going to say, oh, you poor thing, and feed into the victim. You want to actually tell somebody who's going to say, okay, what will we do next? Okay. How do you want to present the best version of you to the world?
Okay. Young ladies who are aspiring to get into marriage life.
You want me to give them advice?
Yes, please.
Oh, that's a really tough one, because I would say, why? Just why? It would start off be having a conversation with yourself about why. Why are you aspiring to get into married life? Is it because you think he'll give you lots of money? Is it because that's what your mother is pressuring you to do? Is it because of cultural ideologies? Is it because you already have a baby with this person? It's actually really having those conversations with yourself. And then, as I said, I believe we can write our own stories when we've had those conversations with ourselves. And we don't have them.
You have books. Okay, you're an author.
Yes.
You've written books.
Mm-hmm.
Would you like them to maybe read them, buy or access? How would they, I'm sure they'll ask, how will you get those books? Where can they be found?
So at the moment, there's one book and it's on Amazon. So it's called Nothing Is Too Big by Susan Knapp. And yeah, that's the easiest way to get it.
So thank you so much, guys, for watching this. I've been your. It's been.
Wow,
it's a wow. Actually,
we're both wowed.
If you're new here, maybe watching us for the first time, remember to subscribe to this channel, and maybe if you're watching us, listening to this amazing lady for the first time, we have the first video that we did with her like 7 days ago, impromptu. You can go watch. There's an amazing story there. And also, she's an entrepreneur. She's an author. She has written many books. How many?
There's one book, but there's 3 more coming.
There is one book, 3 more coming. So go read that one in case you get access to it. So I've been your host, Davy Chams. See you in the next video. Bye.